Thanks very much for joining us. Did your city or town have a Proposition 2.5 override vote this spring? Are your local schools facing layoffs this summer? Well, those are just a couple of the symptoms of intense financial pressure that cities and towns throughout our state are feeling these days. And here to talk about that and more is Adam Chapdelaine, the former Arlington town manager who's been CEO of the Mass Municipal Association. That's the organization that represents cities and towns since 2023. Adam, good to have you back.
Glad to be here. Good to see you, John.
So last fall, the MMA put out a report forecasting a, quote, perfect storm of cost pressures across the board: insurance, energy, construction costs, healthcare especially. Well, it's nearly a year later. Has that dire forecast come true?
I think it has. I think many of those pressures you just listed have remained in place. They haven't really tempered. Revenues remain constrained, and that's why we called it the perfect storm, because there was a confluence of events coming together at the same time. And I think we did, I don't want to say we predicted it, but we forecast it in October, and now we're in the middle of July. And as you said in the lead, communities have faced a lot of pressure, and many are feeling those impacts now.
Now, we've heard a lot about school layoffs and some communities' potential school closures. Now, we always do in the spring and early summer, and then a lot of times those are reversed in the fall. Is that going to happen again this year, or is that wishful thinking?
I think it's generally wishful thinking.
Okay.
I mean, I can't speak to the on-the-ground realities of every school district or every community, but, as I talk to members, as I read headlines every day, cities and towns did not have the revenue needed to balance the budgets this year and had to make tough decisions. Some school layoffs, library hours reduced or library closures. There were public safety layoffs, public works reductions, local beaches closed. So I think there's been impacts on the school side, on the city and town side that are quite real.
Now, the budget process is still ongoing on Beacon Hill, but all parties involved have spoken about how much they want to give in local aid. Particularly the unrestricted local aid, that's sort of the lifeblood. Are they doing enough?
So I think we have made real meaningful progress this year. It doesn't mean those impacts that we just talked about aren't happening and aren't real, but the Senate, the House, the governor, they're using the terminology that we're using. They're talking about it like it's a perfect storm. They're talking about those cost pressures. So this year, unrestricted general government aid was in the final budget going up more than what state revenue is predicted to grow at, 3%, or a total of $40 million. So we think we've made progress, and we hope it is a first step, or maybe even more than one first step towards continuing to make progress in years ahead.
Now, again, there's 351 cities and towns, so it's hard to generalize here. But one thing, Adam, that I did hear over the last couple of years when I'd make my calls around Beacon Hill is that, well, obviously we sympathize with the plight, but a lot of cities and towns took their pandemic money and spent it on what could be argued were frills or non-essential items, and now they're crying poor mouth and we don't like it. Is that an attitude that you're encountering or not?
I haven't specifically heard that, but I'd counter that narrative and say that everything we're facing now, I think we would have been talking about 2, 3, 4 years ago, if not for that ARPA pandemic money.
Okay.
A lot of those dollars, the federal government let cities and towns basically plug financial gaps with. It was sort of called a revenue loss provision. So if you'd lost up to $10 million in annual revenue based on pandemic impacts, you could use those federal dollars to plug the gap.
I guess more specifically, the complaint was that some cities and towns hired up using the ARPA money, and now they got to lay them off.
Well, I think there were needs that were trying to be met. Public health needs, special education needs, pandemic recovery needs in schools. There was the ARPA money, and there's something called ESSER that schools were using.
Right.
So was there hiring? Yes, I can't dispute that. Was that hiring done to meet very real needs demonstrated from the pandemic? I think also yes.
And, local aid is all well and good, But at the core of a lot of fiscal constraints for communities are the constraints of Proposition 2.5.
That's right.
Seems like every time you're here, we talk about this. You've actually made proposals, the MMA has, for easing those constraints, making it basically easier to go ahead and pass an override. They haven't gone anywhere. Do you see that changing? Is there less political resistance given the crunch?
Well, I want to start by saying, we do see a lot of value in Prop 2.5, in its stability, in its certainty, its predictability of tax revenues. But as you said, we have proposed flexibility, still tied to a ballot vote, because we think one of the values of Prop 2.5 is letting voters have a say on how they'll be taxed. When we made those recommendations in December, we knew we were going to be rapidly up against the end of a legislative session coming up in just a couple weeks now. So we are now already starting discussions with legislators, legislative leadership, the governor, about what next session could look like on some of those ideas. It won't be easy, right? It is a sacrosanct law. But as we look at these competing cost pressures and revenue constraints, we do feel like reasonable 21st century flexibilities have to be on the table.
There are a lot of groups in the state who become frustrated with legislative inaction on what they want to see happen, and so they go to the ballot process. Prop 2.5 was a ballot question back in 1980. Is that a potential move?
I don't see us ever pursuing that. I think we feel like we have a compelling case, and we'll continue to make that case to leaders. So I wouldn't be willing to go that far today.
Now, another revenue-raising issue that's been in the news really for the last couple of years is the whole topic of reclassification. Boston, in particular, because of the crash of the downtown real estate market and the resulting impact on revenues, wants to, at least temporarily for a period of years, jack up the rates on commercial properties in order to keep the rates down on residential properties. The state Senate has said no to that. It's been a big battle. Now it's playing out politically. Where do you folks stand on that? Is this something that you want to get in the middle of or not?
I mean, we always say local leaders need flexibility. They know what's best for their community. We were supportive of this when it happened some 10, 12 years ago, and Mayor Menino pursued it and utilized it. We've been supportive of it, and I've been part of press availabilities and other events with the mayor supporting this. I'm more of a numbers guy than a political guy. And the funny thing about this is that when you look at the math, all the mayor was ever considering doing was decreasing the level of increase that commercial tax rate is. There was no jacking of the rate. So I think giving Mayor Wu, potentially other local leaders, more flexibility to manage trying times are just the types of conversations we need to be having.
We're just about out of time, but so I'm going to ask you for kind of a quick answer, and it's tough because it's a complicated question. But it caught my eye that the MMA came out in opposition to the ballot question that would allow starter homes to be built on smaller lots. And advocates say, well, this is a way to generate this desperately needed new, more affordable housing. Why did you come out against it?
So we're always going to want to protect local authority, but very specifically, this ballot question provides no affordability provisions. So there's no guarantee that the homes that would be built as a result of this would be accessible in an affordable manner to Massachusetts residents. And there's also no consideration of infrastructure or infrastructure capacity. Wastewater, drinking water, any other related things are not part of the question and are not given consideration in any regulation that would be conceived after. And those are real challenges, right? If you're going to build, you got to make sure the infrastructure is there. So we have some very practical concerns about that question.
Well, Adam, you and the MMA have a lot on your platter. Come back again soon, and we'll get an update on where all this stuff stands. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome.